Debating SA, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2018 Debating SA Grand Final for Year 10. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We recognise and we respect their cultural heritage, their beliefs and their relationship with this land. As we all know, debating is an enjoyable and a very worthwhile activity. It helps develop skills in young people in relation to research, teamwork, clear thinking, empathy, reflection, communication and self-confidence. Today marks the conclusion to another great season of debating. This year we've had a record number of teams, 261 teams, representing 64 primary and secondary schools across all the Adelaide sectors. I thank and I commend all debaters who have taken part this year. At Debating SA, we are also always looking for debaters who are keen to move to the next step in debating and to become an adjudicator. Debating SA provides all the necessary training, so if the current Year 10s or anyone you know in Year 10 or above is interested in pursuing this process of becoming an adjudicator, please contact us and we'll give you further details. For a long time now, for over 27 years I think, Debating SA has been totally committed to promoting and supporting debating as a highly valuable and worthwhile skill for our young people. We are very honoured indeed to have the ongoing support and patronage of the Governor of South Australia, His Excellency Hugh Van Lay. All teams taking part in today's Grand Finals will be presented with a medallion of recognition at a ceremony to be held on Friday the 2nd of November at Sacred Heart College in Somerton Park, commencing at 5:30. All debaters will be informed of detailed arrangements very soon. I want to express sincere thanks to my fellow board members and in particular to James Tran, Sonia Lowen and David Morton for their unstinting commitment and hard work in organising and running our very complex and diverse program, as well as providing training and resources for all our schools. We thank the army of parents, coaches, teachers, adjudicators, families and helpers, all of whom, and many of you are here today, who have provided invaluable support and assistance and encouragement for our debaters. We thank our host schools for so generously making available their facilities and their staff so that we can run our debating evenings. And a special thank you to Nazareth College for providing a venue for training sessions. We are also very grateful today to the Honourable Stephen Marshall, Premier of South Australia, the Honourable David Spears, Member for the seat of Black, and their parliamentary colleagues for kindly and generously facilitating our use of this venue. We also sincerely thank the parliamentary House staff for their assistance throughout today. This place, the House of Assembly Chamber in our state's own parliament, stands as a very powerful and enduring symbol of our democracy. It stands as a symbol of free speech and the opportunity for rigorous and respectful debate. It is indeed a most suitable and the most appropriate venue to hear our top Year 10 debaters for 2018. So all the very best to our two Grand Final teams today. I'm sure that we are in for a very enjoyable and engaging exchange of ideas and thoughts. So without further ado, Mr. Chairman, let the debate begin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2018 Year 10 Division Debating SA Grand Final debate. My name is James Burgess, and I am the chairman of this debate. The timekeeper is Charles Quigley. The topic of this debate is that the SA government should butt out of changing the laws for vaping. The affirmative team seated to my right is from Pulteney Grammar School, consisting of First Speaker James Lance, Second speaker, Jack Buenfeld. Third speaker, William Brooke. The negative team seated to my left is from St. Peter's Girls' School, consisting of first speaker, Faye Ma, second speaker, Emily Lowe, and third speaker, Ellen Zhang. This grand final debate will be judged by a panel of 5 adjudicators who are Mr. Howey, Ms. Coote, Ms. Burrows, Mr. Hensley, and Mr. Hazel. The speaking time for this debate is 6 minutes. A single warning bell will sound at 5 minutes, and a double bell will sound at 6 minutes. If required, a continuous bell will sound 30 seconds after the second bell, indicating that the speaker must conclude their speech. I ask that all mobile phones and other electronic devices be switched off for the duration of the debate. I declare this debate open and call upon James to open the affirmative case.
Over the past few months, there has been much debate over the legal status of vaping in South Australia. As a result, the South Australian Labor Party recently announced that they would be reintroducing a bill to Parliament, a bill that did not pass back in March. This bill would have the government making changes, including banning the sale of e-cigarettes to people under the age of 18, making sure you can't vape in those non-smoking areas, restricting the general advertisement of vaping products, and preventing the online sale of e-cigarettes. This would make the laws on vaping far more similar to the laws on smoking. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for this afternoon's debate is that the SA government should butt out of changing the laws on vaping. As the affirmative team, we agree with this statement and believe that the SA government has no right to change the laws at this time. But before we tell you why this is, we would like to spend some time explaining the topic. The SA government is the current group of people within the South Australian Parliament that form the cabinet of the state. The present SA government contains members of the Liberal Party. We interpret the metaphor butt out of changing the laws to mean to presently refrain from making alterations or amendments to the law. We are talking specifically about the changes suggested in the current bill that I explained previously. We're not suggesting that there should never be changes made to the law, just that at this time they stop the push to change the laws and take a step back. Vaping is the use of an e-cigarette, which, as defined by the Cancer Council, is a personal inhaler device used like a cigarette. The key difference, however, is that they are not lit like a traditional cigarette. They are powered by batteries that evaporate liquids contained in cartridges. This afternoon I, the first speaker, will be explaining how much safer vaping is than smoking, which is why it should remain more accessible than smoking. I will also be discussing the complete lack of information surrounding the long-term effects of vaping. The second speaker will be telling you about the environmental benefits of vaping compared to cigarettes, and the economic gains e-cigarettes bring to the country and to the state. The third speaker will be rebutting the points of the team opposite and summarising our case. Now, on to my first point. Vaping is a far less dangerous activity than smoking. According to a study from a British organisation called Public Health England, the use of an e-cigarette is 95% less dangerous than smoking a cigarette. To put this into perspective for you, I'd like to briefly explain some of the effects of smoking a traditional cigarette. According to the Better Health Channel, smoking has many adverse effects, including increased risk of lung infection, higher risks of strokes and heart attacks, and more. We felt it important to bring this to your attention because, according once again to the Public Health England, less than 10% of adults understand that these issues I just mentioned do not come from the nicotine in cigarettes. No, they come from the tobacco, which is one of over 600 chemicals completely absent from e-cigarettes, according to the American Lung Association. Now, why is this relevant? The topic is that the SA government should butt out of changing the laws, not that vaping is better than smoking. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's because we believe that if vaping is so much better than smoking, then it should not be restricted. It would be unethical and unscientific to do so. To get an idea of what we need to do moving forward in South Australia, it is useful to look elsewhere. Professor Colin Mendelsohn, an associate of the University of New South Wales and a tobacco treatment specialist, points to the United States and the United Kingdom to lead the way. In these countries, vaping is not only unrestricted, but an approved aid to stop smoking. And it is having benefits. Over the last 3 years, in the countries I've just mentioned, smoking rates have fallen faster than ever. However, in Australia, the numbers have not been dropping at all. For the first time ever, the US has a lower smoking rate than Australia, this all according to Mendelsohn. If a tobacco treatment specialist is suggesting that vaping is not only less harmful than smoking, but useful, then should the South Australian government not be encouraging e-cigarettes as devices to quit smoking, rather than restricting them? Another common concern around vaping is that it can be a risk for bystanders through passive vaping. However, this is simply not true. I would like to return to Colin Mendelson, who I remind you is a tobacco treatment specialist, who said this: "A recent study demonstrates that e-cig vapor consists of liquid droplets that evaporate within seconds of being exhaled. This is compared to cigarette smoke that can linger in the air for over 45 minutes. Another study from the US National Library of Medicine found that the risk of lung cancer from passive vaping is 100,000 times less than passive smoking, as the chemicals within cigarettes that cause lung cancer are completely absent in e-cigarettes." On to my next point. Unfortunately, there is very little research out there to show what the effects of vaping actually are. Because of this, we would strongly suggest that the SA government hold off on making any judgment on the matter at present, and instead revisit the issue after the appropriate facts have been found. Now, it may be suggested that we should err on the side of caution and simply change the laws of vaping now, just in case there are negative side effects later. However, ladies and gentlemen, that simply would not do. Vaping has proven to be a useful aid in quitting smoking, as we've shown you. This is fact. To suggest that these statistics should be ignored in favour of a risk that may not exist at all would simply be setting an impossible standard. By this standard, no new drug or treatment would ever be allowed without 20 to 30 years of continuous testing to prove there was no risk associated with it at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, the SA government should butt out of changing the laws for vaping because of the far, far lower risk associated with it when compared to smoking, as well as the usefulness to prevent people from smoking, which is a deadly habit. As well as this, the lack of information available to the government at this time means that they would not be able to make the informed decision we all want to see. Thank you.
I call upon Faye to open the negative case.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate today is that the SA government should butt out of changing the laws for vaping. We, the negative team, believe this statement to be false. That is, we are saying that the SA government should proceed with changing the laws for vaping by enforcing tighter restrictions. We agree with the definition made by the affirmative team. Today, as first speaker, I will be informing you about how it is the government's responsibility to maintain the health of SA citizens under 18 by restricting vape, and that current advertisements which are instilling the acceptance and encouragement of vaping need to be regulated. Our second speaker, Emily, will be talking about how the South Australian government are neglecting their responsibilities towards the environment due to the amount of pollution caused by vaping, and also how they need to fulfil their social and ethical obligations towards South Australians. Our third speaker, Ellen, will rebut and sum up our team case. Before I move on to my points, I would like to address the obvious flaws in the opposition's debate. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that vaping is much better than smoking and less harmful. However, vaping has only been introduced recently, so there are multiple unknown facts about e-cigarettes. There are already warning signs of negative effects on health from e-cigarettes, such as the effects of solvents, flavourants and toxicants, which are not completely understood. The government has learnt from tobacco cigarettes and asbestos that it is dangerous to allow these harmful substances to continue use, as they create problems for the public later on. Their responsibility now is to not allow this to happen again by intervening with the laws and restrict SA citizens, especially those under the age of 18, from vaping. Now on to my points. My first point is that it is the government's responsibility to maintain the health of South Australian citizens. Currently, the law states that vaping with nicotine is available even to minors. However, compared with older adults, the brains of youth and young adults are more vulnerable to the negative consequences of nicotine exposure, and it is the government's responsibility to limit these dangers. The Alcohol and Drug Foundation of Australia states that although research into health risks of nicotine is limited, studies have already found that it has damaging effects on the brain. The effects include addiction, reduced impulse control, deficits in attention, and mood disorders. It is the state government's responsibility to be mindful of these people and act in order to protect those at risk. By restricting the sale of vape to young adults, it is more likely that they will not be exposed to these effects. My second point is that the current advertisements of vape are instilling within the minds of youth acceptance and encouragement of vaping, which is a harmful and addictive activity. The government is able to limit this exposure in advertisements and should utilise that ability. The call for tighter restrictions was sparked by concerns that children were getting access to vaping devices, which could potentially act as a novelty factor and encourage more young Australians to take up smoking or other forms of drugs. The change in laws will restrict the promotion and common advertisements of vape, especially to adolescents. Like marketers of conventional cigarettes, marketers of e-cigarettes use a number of channels and tactics to advertise and promote their products. These channels include extensive marketing on the internet and advertising in mainstream media, including popular magazines, product placement on social media, and even television commercials. E-cigarette brands also use websites to interact directly with their customers through direct-to-consumer marketing, for example, direct email and social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The government has the ability to control and regulate aspects of the general public's health, and this involves the promotion, manufacturing, and public use of certain products that pose detrimental effects to people's health. The changing of laws would restrict the amount of advertisement that is viewed and would also regulate the content of these ads, such as adding compulsory sections of information including health risks and manufacturing information. Adolescents, who no doubt have access to all types of technology, are continuing to gain interest in this product. Without any restrictions, the youth are subjected to the harmful effects of electronic cigarettes and can develop dangerous behaviours. By changing the laws, the current advertisements will not be shown as frequently to the public, especially younger people, and the government will be limiting the unhealthy risks that will be taken by these people. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, to maintain the health of SA citizens, especially those under 18, the government have the responsibility to regulate current advertisements and promotional materials. To do this, we strongly believe that the government should not butt out of changing the laws for vaping, and instead they should enforce tighter restrictions. Thank you.
To continue the affirmative case, please welcome Jack.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. As you are aware, we have been debating on the notion that the South Australian government should butt out of changing the laws for vaping. We as the affirmative team strongly agree with the principles of this statement. Our first speaker has previously outlined evidence that shows how e-cigarettes are a safer alternative to traditional tobacco-based cigarettes, explaining how the proposed laws would restrict this safe alternative. He has also referred to the limited research that exists to conclude it is dangerous. Based on these observations, the state government should refrain from imposing this change until a thorough investigation is made into the pros and cons of vaping. Today, I will provide evidence that suggests that the South Australia's economy will be disrupted as a direct result of the proposed bill. This includes laws relating to prohibiting online sales and restricting advertising. In addition to this, I will counter the argument that advocates the ban of e-cigarettes in similar zones where traditional smoking is forbidden. But before I proceed with my main points, I would like to point out some of the flaws in the opposing negative team's argument. The first speaker has said that e-cigarettes will encourage young people to pick up smoking. However, what she has falsely said is it is illegal for anyone to have, for under 18-year-olds to have access to nicotine products. If an adolescent has access to vaping, they either have approval for therapeutic needs or are operating outside the law, in which case changing the law would not affect them. The first negative speaker has also said that nicotine is extremely harmful. However, nicotine is not the villain here. A study by the UK Royal College of Physicians have concluded that nicotine has relatively minor health effects, not causing lung cancer or lung disease, rarely, sorry. In fact, it is the other chemicals being burnt by traditional cigarettes that are extremely lethal. Now on to my first point. South Australia represents the nation's largest e-cigarette industry, according to The Australian. Stricter regulation would most definitely disrupt the business. According to The Australian, the industry in SA contributes over $30 million to South Australia's economy, as well as directly employing 200 individuals. And the industry is in fact projected to grow. However, the implementation of this proposed bill, which acts to regulate the sale and promotion of e-cigarettes, poses an economic threat for this valuable domestic market. The lobby group, referred to as the Australian Vaping Advocacy Trade and Regulation, alongside the Australia, predicts strict regulation will cause the industry to crash, with a large percentage of jobs being lost in SA. A direct example of this is vape store owner Mr. Jackson, who was featured in a column for The Advertiser, which was published in 2018. He fears that he will be forced to move interstate, as the regulations will not allow Jackson to sell his products online, with the majority of his customers hailing from rural parts of Australia, who do not have access to vape stores in their local area. This will be a similar fate for many vape store owners in South Australia. If the South Australian government is to inhale stricter regulation purely based upon argumentation theory, that is following in the footsteps of other states, they would effectively be destroying a booming industry that has proven to have great economic potential. They would also be cutting off e-cigarettes as a safe alternative to cigarettes for many Australians who can only access them online. To my second point, maintaining current laws relating to e-cigarettes will also be economically beneficial to the individual. This is a result of traditional cigarettes being a much more significant investment. News.com.au states that a pack-a-day smoker spends on average $7,300 annually. The aforementioned tobacco treatment specialist, Professor Mendelsohn, concluded that an individual who invests in nicotine e-cigarettes for the same period is only spending $1,150 per year. This statistic represents an annual saving of an estimated $6,150. Vaping has proven to be 80% less expensive than smoking, and as our first speaker referenced, 95% safer. So why would the state government push to demonise this recreational activity when it has the ability to save potential smokers thousands of dollars in fees? Therefore, the state government changing the laws has the potential to economically harm individual vapers and prospering small businesses. To my final point, as a result of vaping being far less impactful to the environment and surrounding individuals, it is absurd to try and restrict vaping to certain zones, such as cigarettes. Unlike traditional cigarettes, e-cigarettes do not produce a byproduct, such as a cigarette filter, commonly known as a butt, that can be disregarded to Auntie Marty's rosebush. According to the government of Western Australia, 7 billion cigarette butts are lidded in Australia each year. Cigarette butts are made out of cellulose acetate, existing as a form of plastic that heavily irritates the environment. Furthermore, according to news.com.au, e-cigarettes do not harm the terms of passive smoking, a trait that lingers around cigarettes. The claim is supported by the National Health Services in the UK, who in 2018 conducted a study which concluded that as a result of vaping not burning an abundance of chemicals such as IQOS, there are no known health risks to nearby individuals. These factors alone should exclude e-cigarettes from smoke-free zones. The continued support of this green alternative would guarantee a cleaner, safer future, whilst also allowing the individual to have access to a recreational and possibly a rehabilitative product. It's important that South Australian government realises that e-cigarettes and traditional cigarettes have completely different characteristics attached. E-cigarettes have a less impact on the environment, health, and have a wide economic benefit. The regulations should instead promote a unique set of guidelines for the industry, but only following extensive and meaningful research conducted not only locally, but internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not time to burn out this industry just yet. Thank you.
To continue the negative case, please welcome Emily.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate today is that the South Australian Government should butt out of vaping laws. We, the negative team, firmly disagree with this statement. Our first speaker has already spoken to you today about how it's the government's responsibility to maintain the health of citizens in South Australia, particularly the younger citizens. She also addressed that advertising and promotion of e-cigarettes and their negative influences. My points for today are that by intervening in the vaping laws, the South Australian Government would restrict the amount of air pollution that is created from vaping. My second point is that by the South Australian Government choosing not to intervene in vaping laws, they would also be ignoring their social and ethical obligations towards South Australia. However, before I further expand on my argument, I would like to point out the flaws in the opposition's major points. The second speaker has tried to tell you that the environmental benefits of vaping compared to smoking are better and therefore should not have any restrictions placed on them. However, this is false because there has been research that has been done to show that the air pollution of vaping compared to cigarettes isn't all that different. And a study done by Shelburne W. in 2014 showed that vaping released ultrafine particles into the air, such as glycerin and nitric acids, and putative carcinogenic matter and nitric oxide, all of which is similar to the pollutants of cigarettes. He also stated that the laws should not change in regards to vaping due to the economic benefits that they would bring to our economy. But what is more important? The economic benefits that vaping would bring to our state or the health of our current and future generation? Our first speaker has already spoken about the negative effects of vaping that is already happening to our younger generation. And by intervening in the laws would withhold the health of our state is worth the minor benefits of vaping might have. Also, the businesses which sell e-cigarettes, as such, are usually individually known businesses, and so the e-liquid and devices are unknown quantity, compromise the safety and satisfaction. A question we have to ask ourselves: what is more important? Again, the health of SA citizens or the loss of a few jobs? As I said previously, my first point is that by intervening in vaping laws, the South Australian Government would be able to restrict the amount of air pollution that is created from vaping. Currently, 5 out of the 8 states in Australia prohibit vaping in indoor and outdoor smoke-free zones, and in South Australia, vaping indoor and outdoor smoke-free zones is legal, as it was once believed that vaping did not create as much air pollution as smoking. However, as I said previously, a research done by Shoba W in 2014 as part of the Department of Chemical Safety and Toxicity showed that vaping creates just as much air pollution as smoking does. In the experiment, volunteers consumed e-cigarettes with and without nicotine, and the air quality of the room was monitored. The results were that in the room, substantial amounts of glycerin and nicotine were found in gas forms, along with a 20% concentration rise of putative carcinogenic matter, a parasite organism which research has been shown to be linked to cancer in patients, and FeNO levels increased in all patients. FeNO stands for fractional exhaled nitric oxide, which can lead to asthma attacks. This shows that e-cigarettes are by no means emission-free and pose a health risk to both consumers and other citizens, and also contributes to the air pollution rates in South Australia, hence why the government should intervene in laws to make vaping in indoor and outdoor smoke-free zones illegal. My second point is that by the South Australian government choosing not to intervene in vaping laws, they would also be ignoring their social and ethical obligations towards South Australia. Currently in South Australia, the use and consumption of e-cigarettes with e-liquid containing nicotine is legal for all ages. Liquid nicotine is made from extracting nicotine from tobacco, the same substance used in cigarettes. Today, tobacco farms all over the world are abusers of child labour. Research done by The Guardian shows that children under the age of 14 years are kept out of school and employed in hard and sometimes harmful physical labour to produce tobacco. The research shows that children have to work in conditions that expose them to nicotine poisoning through handling leaves, harsh physical labour, and poor living and sanitation conditions. The government has a social and ethical responsibility, and part of that is to try and prevent an exploitation and avoid exploitation of human rights as well as children's rights. By continuing to allow the high demand of e-liquid containing nicotine, the South Australian government are disregarding their social and ethical responsibilities to support developing countries and people. Therefore, the South Australian government should intervene in vaping laws to uphold their social and ethical responsibilities, to help prevent the abuse of child labour in the tobacco industry, and by regulating the consumption of e-cigarettes containing nicotine. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the South Australian government should not butt out of vaping laws for the following reasons. By intervening in the law to prevent vaping in indoor and outdoor non-smoking areas, it would help to restrict the amount of air pollution, as well as reduce the hazards e-cigarettes have on both consumers and other citizens through their pollutants. Also, by intervening, the South Australian government would be upholding their social and ethical responsibilities, as they would be helping to prevent and avoid the exploitation of human rights in terms of child labour. Thank you.
With the affirmative case, I call upon William.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. As you have heard, today's debate has discussed the topic, that the SA government should butt out of changing the laws for vaping. Today, we have shown for you why it is indeed in everybody's best interest for the government to butt out and not go ahead with the proposed changes in this bill. We should be making this safer alternative to smoking easier and more accessible, not restricting it to the point of impracticality. Before I go on to summarise our team's case, I would like to address some of the concerns raised by the speakers opposite. To begin, the opposition's first speaker stated that there is not enough research to know the long-term effects of vaping, and therefore we should regulate it more. However, we would like to point out that according to the UK Royal College of Physicians, I quote, "Nicotine is not the villain." This is the main concern, the chemical which is cause for main concern in vaping. It only causes minor health conditions according to the Royal College, and it's nothing like the many hundreds or possibly thousands of chemicals in cigarettes. It carries no risk of cancer or lung disease. Further, waiting for all this research to ensure that vaping is indeed safe would set an impossible standard. Vaping is, after all, a therapeutic instrument to get over a smoking addiction. It's very useful in helping people survive what could have been a lethal habit. As I stated, if this new treatment had to be tried and tested for over as much as 40 years to ensure long-term health benefits were ensured, no new medical advancements could be made, or if they were, they couldn't be used and benefited from for 40 or 50 years. This is simply impractical. Further, the opposition's first speaker stated that nicotine is legal. We would like to point out that this is blatantly false. Australia-wide law bans the sale of nicotine except for therapeutic needs or with an approval from a general practitioner. She also stated that by allowing the sale of e-cigarettes to under 18s, the government is not upholding their responsibility to maintain health. However, we would like to point out that e-cigarettes are indeed safer than e-cigarettes, and over the years, cigarette rates in adolescents have dropped. This is because adolescents are changing from cigarettes to e-cigarettes. I have a few statistics here to show this. According to the US Department of Health and Human Services, in 2015, 13.6% of Year 12s said they smoked. In 2015, only 5.5%. This is a dramatic shift from a culture of smoking, which is highly dangerous. As our first speaker pointed out, 95% more dangerous than e-cigarettes. More locally, Tobacco Australia has pointed out that in 2015, 18% of 17-year-olds smoked. However, in 2014, only 12%. That's a 6% drop, which is massive and could be saving the lives of many, many adolescents. This is good reason for the government not to further restrict vaping, but allow it as a more accessible alternative to e-cigarettes. On to the opposition's second speaker. She stated that in rebuttal to our second speaker's point about environmental benefits of making vaping more accessible, that we said there should be, quote, not have any restriction. We did not, however, state this, and this is indeed a strawman fallacy. The opposition's second speaker has made our point exaggerated in order to make it easier to rebut and deal with. However, if we were to entertain this fallacy, I'll move on to my next point. She stated that e-cigarettes are dangerous to the environment and cause pollution in air quality. However, if we were to regulate e-cigarettes and make them harder to use, many of the smokers and cigarette users who have worked hard to get over an addiction and swap to this safer alternative would have to go back to smoking because it's more accessible. and this would lead to even greater damage to the air quality due to more cigarettes. To summarise our team case, our first speaker discussed the health risks of cigarettes and the relative lack thereof for vaping, highlighting a study from Public Health England suggesting vaping is as much as 95% less dangerous. Our government should be encouraging a safe transition to vaping, not restricting it further. He also pointed out the government's current inability to make an informed decision due to lack of research. Our second speaker highlighted the economic side of this debate, with reference to the detrimental effect this bill could have on both the individual and Australia's largest e-cigarette industry. He demonstrated that the annual cost of e-cigarettes use could be as much as $6,150 cheaper. This is a massive cost, which we don't want people to have to pay to make less accessible. To conclude, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, no one stands to benefit from this legislation. Not those who turn to vaping as an alternative to smoking, not the small businesses relying on online sales, and definitely not those using this technology to curb a cigarette addiction. The SA government must butt out of changing the laws for vaping. Thank you.
To conclude the negative case and this afternoon's debate, I call upon Ellen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for today's debate is that the SA government should butt out of changing the laws for vaping. We as the negative team strongly disagree with this statement and believe that the SA government should change the laws for vaping to restricting the sale of e-cigarette products to the people under 18, restrict advertising and promoting of e-cigarette products, and restrict the use of cigarettes in smoke-free zones. Today, as third speaker, I'll be summarising our team's argument and rebutting the opposition's case. Firstly, I would like to point out some flaws in the opposition's argument. The opposition's first speaker tried to tell you that there is very little research to show the effects of vaping, hence it is too early to put regulations in place. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the exact reason why regulations must be put in place. The long-term effects from vaping are still unclear, given that e-cigarettes were only introduced in 2006. The research team at the University of Connecticut says that vaping has the same cancer-causing effects as smoking tobacco cigarettes. Currently, whether e-cigarettes have an overall positive or negative impact on public health is still unknown. Chief Executive of the Public Health Association of Australia, Terry Slevin, said that, quote, "Until that case can be proven, it makes sense to keep the Australian public as safe as we can, and at this stage, that is ensuring that they're not as available. Hence, we believe that there must be regulations in place that our team speakers have already mentioned for the health and safety of citizens in South Australia." The opposition has also tried to tell you that vaping helps people quit smoking. While some research supports the use of vaping as a smoking cessation aid, the body of research has very conflicted results. A 2017 study published in the Public Library of Science contends that vaping helps almost nobody to quit smoking. Instead, individuals become dual users, which means that alongside smoking conventional cigarettes, they also smoke e-cigarettes. Furthermore, this year, more than 850 individuals selected from the Global Knowledge Panel participated in an observational study when survey data results show that 90% of smokers who vaped at the beginning of the study were still smoking 1 year later. Also, rather than being used by smokers as a vehicle to help quit, it may well be used as a vehicle to aid them to continue to smoke. The National Academy of Science, Engineering and Medicine states that e-cigarette use, quote, increases the risk of transitioning to smoking conventional cigarettes. Also, transitioning to vaping is not breaking any kind of addiction. As our first speaker has already stated, vaping is harmful and addictive, so choosing to vape does not break any kind of addiction but starts a new addiction. The opposition has also tried to tell you that other areas in the world, such as Britain and the United States, has placed not tight, loose regulations on vaping with no negative results. However, the Associate Health Minister of New Zealand, one of the countries that has yet to place restrictions on vaping, admits herself that she cannot ensure the safety of e-cigarettes. She says, quote, "It is only a temporary solution with uncovered risks. Countries who have not placed restrictions on vaping are not even sure if their actions will benefit or cause harm for their citizens. For South Australia's case, solid evidence showing that vaping is completely harmless is needed, and currently there just isn't any." The opposition's second speaker has tried to tell you that the South Australian economy will be disrupted by putting these regulations in place, and that it will negatively impact the e-cigarette industry. Ladies and gentlemen, what do we value more? One new booming industry or the health of an entire state? As our team's first and second speaker have already stated, it is the government's responsibility to ensure the health of their citizens, and even if it means the decline of one industry. It is better to potentially harm the e-cigarette industry rather than harm the people of South Australia with a product whose effects we are still unclear of. The opposition, the second speaker of the opposition, has also tried to tell you that buying e-cigarettes is economically beneficial to the individual as e-cigarettes save money. Ladies and gentlemen, with the potential harm vaping has to the body and the environment, as both our first and second speaker have already stated, why should it matter? It's not a safer alternative to smoking. Regardless how cheap, it doesn't change the fact that it's still a potential harmful substance. Here's an example. A home-cooked organic meal is more expensive than a Big Mac. But does that mean we should survive on Big Macs for the rest of our lives just because it's cheaper? No. Also, the third speaker of the affirmative team has stated that nicotine is not the villain. However, nicotine is an addictive substance, even if it is not the reason behind the health risk, but it's because it is in the device, which is why people will be addicted to the substance, which is what is causing the health issues. I will now summarise our team's argument. Our team's first speaker, Faye, has talked to you all about the government's responsibility to maintain the health of younger South Australian citizens by restricting the sale of vape to people under the age of 18. She also spoke to you all about how current vaping laws regarding the advertising and promotion of e-cigarettes are instilling the acceptance and encouragement of the addictive and potentially harmful activity of vaping. Our team's second speaker, Emily, has talked to you all about how by intervening in vaping laws, the South Australian government would be restricting the amount of air pollution that is created from vaping. She also spoke about how the South Australian government, by choosing not to intervene in the vaping laws, would be ignoring their social and ethical obligations towards South Australia. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the SA government should not butt out of changing the laws for vaping. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, while the adjudicators come to their decision, I thought to make an announcement at the start of this debate. We do have a Facebook page, so for the parents, friends and family that are on Facebook, please do like our page. We will be sharing and uploading all the photos on that medium early next week, so all the photos we take today will also go on our website, but please like our Facebook page to keep up to date with all the news that's going on and to see the wonderful students here today. Thank you.
want to reiterate what Mr. Huey said before about thanking the volunteers debating essay the board, and most importantly, the schools and the debaters that we've seen here today. You both really did really well, and the fact that you're in the grand final just illustrates the fact that really you're all great debaters. Unfortunately, there has to be a winner for tonight, and we've awarded on a unanimous verdict that the negatives has won. So, well done.
I call upon a member of the runner-up team, St. Peter's Girls, to give a vote of thanks. Holly Brown.
We'd like to thank everyone who's come along to today's debate. Throughout the season, many people have come to support all debates, and we greatly appreciate all of that. The adjudicators, we understand all of you are volunteers, and the work you do is immeasurable. We all really appreciate it. We'd like to thank Parliament for hosting this debate, and of course the opposition for putting up an amazing case and winning the grand final. Also, Chairman, timekeeper, great job.
Call upon a member of the winning team from St. Peter's Girls School to second that vote.
Likewise, we'd like to thank Parliament for providing an amazing venue. We'd like to thank the adjudicators who really value what you've done throughout this whole year. We'd like to thank everyone who's come today. I'd like to thank the Chairman, our awesome timekeeper as well, and the opposition for putting up an amazing debate. Congratulations on being runners-up. And no, you did amazing, really good debate. And we'd like to just thank Debating SA for providing just such a great program to help debaters grow. And yeah, thank you very, very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.